Welcome back to another episode of the weekly Coastwatch Football Podcast, where we chat all things Central Coast Mariners and the A-League. My name is Lockie, I'm your host. And guys, I just want to start off by saying a huge thank you to everyone who has just sent in some kind words and supported the page in the recent weeks as we're steadily but slowly building towards the kickoff of the A-League season, only 38 days away. But we've just hit 1,000 followers on TikTok, which is just crazy. And on YouTube too, you guys have been really loving the videos, which is great. We did a video the other day ranking the A-League kits. That was really fun. And then we've just started our FIFA Mariners FIFA 22 career mode series, which I think is a great way to sort of build the hype for the season, just going through the season virtually. So the first few episodes of that are up now on the YouTube page as of this podcast upload at least. And the series is going to be continuing through this pre-season. So guys, if you want to check out any of those things, of course, in the description, you can head to the links and check out all the fun action that's happening on Coastwatch Football, because I'm really enjoying creating all this content for you guys. But again, it's certainly not about me. It's all about the community that we're sort of building here. So always looking to get you guys involved. And that is why today's episode is very special, getting you guys involved with some fan questions. And I mean, I put this up on the socials today in terms of because it was sort of just a spur of the moment thing. I was like, I should it'd be cool. I know on a lot of podcasts, they do fan questions as a segment. So I thought I'd try it, and I got inundated with questions. So this just as a one-off is going to be a sort of exclusively a fan question episode, just discussing some of the things that you guys have sent through, which I think will be interesting, and would love to sort of create a conversation. So whether you want to jump to the YouTube comments or on the social media sites, you can sort of, we can get the conversation rolling. But let's kick off with the news surrounding the Mariners and the A-League, and actually a big one for the A-League. The major sponsor for the A-League men's competition has been released, Isuzu Ute Australia. And yeah, man, it doesn't, as a lot of people have already said in the past week, it doesn't quite roll off the tongue, does it? It's Hyundai A-League, really had a ring to it. And it was almost like you sort of just, I remember I used to sort of just think of that as as a package. I didn't even just call it the A-League. I was like, let's watch the Hyundai A-League. It sort of, I don't know, it rolled really well for whatever reason. But Isuzu Ute A-League men's, I'm not sure. Again, this might be something that just with over time, maybe we'll get settled into it. But it might be one of those things where, for example, with the Socceroos and stuff, wasn't it for a while, I don't think they are anymore, but the Caltex Socceroos, obviously no one's going around saying, hey man, are you a fan of the Caltex Socceroos? No one's actually saying that, right? But I think this might be one of those things. No one is actually going to say the Isuzu Ute A-League men's, apart from obviously broadcasters and whatever. But an interesting one. So doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but another car manufacturer has been announced as a major sponsor of the A-League men's competition. The Mariners have confirmed the women's NPL coaching setup, which is very exciting. We're sort of this move is sort of we're sort of preparing to enter the A-League women's competition, as it's called now, in the coming years, and it's great to see that I think we're really going to be taking it seriously and setting ourselves up to really make sure we last in the competition. Of course, the Mariners were in the W League many years ago now, and it's great to see that we're establishing just the groundwork and getting things ready for when we do enter the women's competition, hopefully real soon. So great news for that. And again, the women's football fan base on the coast is massive, and just the introduction of this women's team at a national level in a national competition is going to be absolutely huge. And I'm so excited for them to come to the competition, because then that sort of expands the podcast and sort of the socials even more. We can start covering all the women's league stuff as well. So can't wait for it. There's been some signing news as well. The Mariners have finally signed a backup goalkeeper, Yaron Souza. He's a 24-year-old goalkeeper. He came up through the ranks at Melbourne City and also spent time in Turkey and Malaysia. And he arrives at the Mariners, I think, at an interesting time in his career, 24. It's sort of an interesting age in the life of a footballer where you're not necessarily considered a young, exciting product anymore. By 23, 24, you really start to establish yourself as a footballer. And, Souza coming back to Australia. We're seeing a lot of that, especially during these COVID times, of players returning back to Australia. And I think this is a really sort of interesting signing, because you see a lot of A-League sides as they're sort of their backup keepers. They don't get a lot of game time, obviously, in Australia here. It's not like overseas where you've got regular cup competitions running through, the season where you can rotate squads and keepers. It's pretty much just the A-League for throughout the summer, So it's the backup goalkeeper thing is an interesting thing in the A-League. And I like this signing because, just from what it sounds like, from what Soz is saying, he's not here to just be another backup keeper in the A-League. He's 24. He's someone that wants to establish himself at least at A-League level and really, be playing first-team football. Of course, he's arrived at the club that has arguably the best goalkeeper in the A-League at the moment, and Mark Birighitti, of course, had a standout season for us last year. So, but, it's only going to make things better, right? Having that competition and knowing at least that we have a solid keeper in Yaron Souza to come in case Biras does pick up any injuries or whatever goes on there. So, a good signing, a great signing for the squad, and things starting to look really, really solid now in terms of our squad. And again, we're sort of keeping an eye on that at the moment in terms of, where are there little weaknesses here and there. I think there's only maybe a couple things here and there where we still have to sort of patch up some holes. The signing of Stormberry, which we talked about in last week's podcast, was obviously a great signing as well. But yeah, Yaron Souza, welcome to the club. And finally as well, the Central Coast Mariners 2021-22 kits are now available for pre-order, which is very exciting. I know plenty of fans are very keen to get their hands on those. I'm still tossing up on which one I want because initially I was thinking the navy. Just because it looks so clean. I love the little yellow trim and everything. But the white kit, man, we very rarely see Mariners white kits these days. And it's sort of half blue and half yellow around the neck, and I think the sleeves as well. It's so cool. So I'm actually maybe leaning towards that one. Who knows? Maybe I'll just go crazy and pick up all three. But you will see. You will see when I do finally get them. I will certainly be wearing it on the podcast as soon as they arrive. So very exciting there. And as well, another little extra piece of news: Mariners memberships have started arriving in the mail. I do know a bunch of fans who have started their memberships arriving in the mail. So keep an eye out for that if you are waiting on your Mariners membership. If you are interested in getting a Mariners membership, sign up and support the club. You can do that on the Central Coast Mariners website. The links are all there. Head over to ccmariners.com.au to get that all sorted. But man, okay, fan questions. Let's do it. Because you guys sent us some really good questions. And it's quite thought-provoking questions, which really made me think. And it's again, as I mentioned earlier, I really sort of want to make it a conversational sort of thing and get you guys involved in the conversation as well. So I'd love to hear your opinions on some of these things that we're going to be discussing. So let's jump into it right now. First of all, Harry, shout out to Harry from the Football Podcast. I know he's a big fan of the page, and he's actually a Newcastle Jets fan. And Harry, great work with the podcast. It's good to see you doing your own football podcast as well, and getting the word out there for Australian football. Really, really love it. He asks, who do you think is the Mariners' biggest signing so far? Which is a fantastic question because it's hard to answer because a few of the players that we have brought in so far are unknowns in Cy Goddard, Benny Nkilolo, but I think it has to be Nikolai Muller. He's a class player. He arrived at the Wanderers a couple of years ago, and I don't think he's quite reached his peak in terms of how well he can perform. He was playing in the top flight in Germany for many years, and what is he, 33, 34 now? I think he's still got a lot to offer, and especially in this Mariners side, I think he'll be a great replacement for Danny De Silva. Again, a lot of question marks over where he will fit into the side, whether you play him up top as a striker, in as a number 10. You could probably play him out on the left where Danny De Silva did play last season. So interesting. But for me, Nikolai Muller is up there at number 1. And he also asked, the Football Podcast asks, do you think the Mariners could be challenging for the title this season? And this ties in with some of your guys' other questions as well. Aiden asking honest thoughts on the competition of each team and where we will be on the table. So a lot of questions coming in regarding our placement in the league this season. And if you listen to last week's podcast, I sort of did a rough early table prediction, and I will be doing a proper one closer to the kickoff of the season. But in that rough prediction, I put us in 5th, which is maybe a little bit too optimistic. And even now I'm thinking maybe that is a little bit too optimistic. I have to say, I'd love to see us make finals again. But the main thing is that so many of the other teams, of course, I mean, we say this every year, but so many teams have strengthened this year. The weaker teams have strengthened. Melbourne Victory, Newcastle Jets, the bottom two sides were really out of the competition for the second half of the season. They've both strengthened really well. I can't see either of those sides finishing in the bottom two again this year. And I think the thing to consider as well is that this season, opposition teams won't be viewing Central Coast Mariners as just a walk in the park match. I think in the previous, 5-6 years, teams did come to Central Coast Stadium and, weren't really expecting too much of a challenge. It's crazy to think for such a long time there we just weren't winning games. Obviously, last season was certainly a lot better. But after having such a successful season last year where we were beating so many sides, teams are really going to be wary of us now. And that's the challenge for Nick Montgomery as well. Teams are going to be knowing sort of what they're they know what to expect when they're playing the Mariners now, right? And sort of the defensive shape that we had last season, which was just a key that was the catalyst to our success as well. Teams are going to be figuring that out, man. And, we've got to make sure we stay up to par with them. When you look at the quality of our squads compared to others, I think we're certainly dropping down. And if you were to rank the ladder purely on quality of squad, I don't think there's any chance we're in the top 6. There's so much strength in some of these big clubs. Wanderers, Melbourne Victory, these big clubs have strengthened so well. I'm still going to put us in for a 5th, 6th place finish. Very hard to see us finishing any higher. And that's me being 100% realistic. I like to think that we have the quality to get into the finals, but it's going to be almost impossible to finish in the top 4. Just as I mentioned, the quality in some of those big sides, way too hard to beat. So yeah, guys, it's going to be an interesting one. What do you think? Do you think Mariners have the potential to finish in the top 4? Are we going to be dropping out into the bottom 6 again? No fan likes to predict their team to drop out into the bottom 6, but yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. This is an interesting question in from Sam. How close do you think the Mariners are to being back up at the top of the table consistently? So this sort of ties in nicely with the previous discussion there. But Sam's talking about consistently. In those early years in the A-League, we were one of the top sides. Basically from season 1, where we were in the first ever grand final against Sydney FC, pretty much all the way until 2014. And after that, it was the complete opposite. And it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one because Stajic really set up the foundations for a successful squad last season. And I think fans would have been really had Stajic have stuck around, would have been just as optimistic, even more optimistic for this upcoming season. With Stag leaving, and some key players in, Stensness, Stefan Nigro, Jack Clisby leaving. We still retained a large sort of portion of the squad. But Montgomery coming in, it's just that little bit sort of, a little bit of a question mark now in terms of, is this squad still up there to be a top side in the A-League? I think we're still a few years off. I think we are still a few years off to becoming a top of the table team consistently. You have to look at, when you think of the definition of a top of a team that finishes consistently at the top end of the table, you have to look at Sydney FC. You have to look at now Melbourne City, who are looking real strong and are probably favourites to win the title again. Adelaide and Brisbane are pretty much finishing the finals every single year as well. These sides are constantly bringing in quality players. They are generally really, really strong at home. And I think we're still a few seasons off getting there. If we can have another finish in the finals this year and keep that upward trend going of success at the Central Coast, then I can think we can be optimistic maybe in a couple of years' time that we will be considered a top table side. Because, you know, even this year, even despite finishing third last year, people are predicting us to come, you know, bottom four. So, yeah, man, I think we're still a few years. Off, that's for sure. Some more interesting questions coming in. Aaron asks thoughts on potential fan ownership. This is an interesting one, and I should preface this by saying that I'm not at all I'm not business when it comes to football is certainly not my forte. But the fan ownership thing is one that is really interesting. And as far as I know, none of the sides in the A-League are fan owned. But obviously with a lot of the sort of, question marks over the Mariners and their ownership for the past 12 months, you know, from Mike Charlesworth looking to sell the club, you know, to think 6 months ago or so when Manchester United were interested. That feels like ages ago now. And, you know, the mystery buyers here and there potentially being interested in buying us. A lot of sort of, you know, it's a scary time for Mariners fans, you know, that little bit of uncertainty. So we do want that sort of that feeling of being comfortable, knowing that our club is safe and secure. The fan ownership, I'm just not sure how that would work, especially considering that we don't necessarily have the strongest fan base. And, you know, our membership numbers are one of the lowest in the league. That, of course, you know, you have to consider population sizes and everything. Of course, Central Coast, you know, one of the smallest population. Considering the numbers that we do have and the numbers that we bring to games, well, I think we actually do pretty well comparing, you know, to cities like Perth and Brisbane and Sydney, you know, that have much larger population sizes. So yeah, I'm interested to see how it would work. It'd be interesting to see what you guys think of the fan ownership thing. I think I'd definitely be keen for it, and there's certainly. I mean, I think the great thing about the Mariners is that there is sort of a core group. There's a core fan base that has been there since day one that are really passionate supporters of the club as well, that, you know, will do anything to keep the club afloat. So who knows? Maybe we'll see that happen, you know, one day, a fan ownership of a club in the A-League. I liked this question from Tim, who asks, who do you think has the most potential in the current Mariners squad? So many exciting young players in this Mariners lineup who I reckon we will see have breakout seasons this year in the A-League. And for me, though, if I had to pick one, I would say Max Ballard. Max is someone who got limited minutes in the A-League last season, and from what people are saying around the club and some of the players have said in, you know, interviews here and there and whatever, people are sort of talking him up a little bit in terms of his game. And, you know, as far as we know, has been performing pretty well throughout the youth ranks for a number of years now, Max. And I reckon he's a player that we'll see implemented in the squad a lot more, especially how it's looking at the moment, considering that our only central midfielders are Ollie Bozanic, Joshy Nisbet, and Max Ballard. And, you know, Joshy Nisbet can play out on that right-hand side. And you know, it could be Ballard and at the moment, if we were to start a team, if our FFA Cup round of 32 match was kicking off tomorrow night, you'd probably see Ballard and Bozanic starting in the middle of the park. I think Max Ballard is someone who has the potential to step up and show his quality, because, you know, you think back to that where he played the first half away to Melbourne City, he really struggled, but he showed glimpses here. I think it was at home to Western United, came on in the second half, got to play half an hour, and looked really decent in the middle of the park. Showed good vision, playing decent passes, you know, switching the play a few times. And again, it's tricky to make a full judgment on his play style. You know, not seeing a lot of him, but just hearing everything, and especially, you know, the link with Monty being so involved with the academy sides, Max Ballard as one. I think this could be a huge season for Matt Hatch as well. I think, again, after getting a taste at the A-League last year and that fantastic debut goal, which I keep talking about, I keep thinking back to, it's one of my favorite ever. It's up there. It was one of my favorite all-time Mariners goals. Just such a magical moment for the Mariners, and to see like a local lad score and debut is just awesome. But Matt Hatch could have a big season, and, you know, especially it was actually interesting. The other day on the socials, put out a post sort of covering the depths in the Mariners defense and sort of the options we had there. Left back, you've got Noah Smith, who we've brought in from Adelaide, who is only 20 years of age, and now Matt Hatch. And, people sort of suggesting that they'd probably like to see maybe Hatchie get a run. No, both young players probably at a similar level now. Obviously, Noah Smith just a little bit more A-League experience. Had a sort of a stint at Adelaide United at the first part of the last season. But Hatchie has shown, again, limited minutes, but has showed the signs here. Has a lot of pace. I mean, it's clearly shown on FIFA. If you haven't checked out the FIFA videos, 92 pace, Matt Hatch, one of the fastest players in the A-League. But yeah, man, I'd like to see Hatchie get a run in the A-League as well. I think if you're looking at those two players, and I'm sure that there's going to be more coming through as well. Again, Montgomery, his connection to the academy side, he's going to bring through a bunch of young players. Which actually which reminds me of the fact that it is quite an interesting. I was actually quite surprised, to be honest, to see both Jordan Smiley and Matty Cahill led out to NPL sides, which is an interesting piece of, I guess, transfer news there as well. A little bit extra transfer news, but sort of flew under the radar there. But yeah, Matty Cahill's heading off as well. Of course, Smiley's move was announced a few weeks ago. But I was surprised, considering that I thought both of those players would have gotten some game time this year. And interesting one. It's an interesting one for sure. But pardon me. But keep an eye out for those two players this year, Maxi Ballard, Matt Hatch, and I'm sure there'll be more coming through the production line as well. This is Sam, who asks, former Mariner in their prime that you would add to our current squad. Now, this depends on whether you're talking about their prime at the Mariners or their prime in their career. Because if you're talking about the prime in their career, Mile Jedinak, one of the greatest all-time Socceroos midfielders, Tommy Rogic. I mean, these players, certainly hit the heights later on in their careers compared to when they're at the Mariners, when they're just starting to show a little bit, right? But I'd probably have to go Mile Jedinak. I mean, he's just such a class player. His ability to control things in that sort of central midfield position, his ability to take stunning free kicks and penalties, just a fantastic player. But as well, Patrick Zwanswijk is up there as well. If you're looking at players who have had the best sort of, in their prime while at the Mariners, Patrick Zwanswijk was 36, 37 while playing at the Mariners, but he's up there as one of our greatest players of all time. And for me, he's probably up there, top 3 favorite players of all time. That's for sure. He was just incredible. Trent Sainsbury as well. Actually, funnily enough, that sort of cues in nicely a couple of episodes ago. If you want to check it out, we ran through the greatest Mariners team of all time, going from goalkeeper all the way up to strikers. So, we spent a lot of time reminiscing on some of those players. But yeah, Mile Jedinak for me. Okay, we've got some interesting questions coming in as well involving the A-League. And, of course, we're with the podcast, not just talking about the Mariners, but looking to expand things to the A-League as well. And do have a question coming in here. Thoughts on Melbourne Victory this season? Finals contenders? And again, it's Melbourne Victory, who I just touched on earlier, I think will certainly improve this season. And, not only have they brought in a wide variety of quality players, Jason Davidson, Matt Sporanovic, they brought in a centre-back from a former Wolves centre-back, Roderick Miranda, Josh Brolante's in there, Nick D'Agostino, and more to come in as well. But the biggest signing for me is Tony Popovich, who is an incredibly successful coach at A-League level, won the premiership with Wanderers in their inaugural season and won the premiership with Perth Glory in his first season in charge, and of course won an Asian Champions League. Will Melbourne Victory be finishing in the finals? I think yes. I definitely think yes. I know in my ladder prediction I did last episode, I said 7th for them, but it's already chopping and changing now. I think we'll definitely see Victory finish in the top 6. Top 4? I don't know. I can't see them matching Melbourne City this season. I can't see them matching Sydney FC. I can see them maybe finishing 5th, 4th. They might sneak into 4th. But yeah, for sure. Melbourne Victory will jump up, that's for sure. Another question, well, this isn't much of a question, but just simply a statement. Transfer news. Sean asks about transfer news, if there's going to been any transfer news happening. So, of course, we've covered Yaron Souza arriving at the club just in recent days. But the one I do want to touch on as well, and shout out to SB4, and Twitter has asked about this as well, about the Brazilian striker who the Mariners have been linked with recently, Mateus Moresh, who's been playing at Geylang International in Singapore. Now, some interesting developments. Nothing major, But the season is finishing up. They have just played their last game a couple of days. This past weekend, they just played their last league game. And we've been following the Instagram stories and everything, just like keeping an eye on if there's any hints of like, heading to Australia or something, right? And I there's a couple things to this, right? Number one, the season finishing, as just mentioned, in Singapore. But number two, the release of Matt Cahill. Jordan Smiley and Matt Cahill both leaving to get game time at NPL clubs shows that they won't be getting game time here, which is bizarre considering that our only real strikers are Matt Simon and Marco Renia, which suggests that Mariners will probably be bringing in another striker, 23-year-old Brazilian striker Mateus Moresh. So I think with Cahill now leaving, this just boosts the chances of Moresh signing. I reckon we'll see it happen. Hopefully in the coming weeks, we'll see it announced. And we'll keep our eyes out for it. But he sounds like an exciting player. I've seen a couple highlight snippets from here and there from his time in Singapore there, and he looks pretty decent. So he looks tall, he looks fast as well, and 23 years of age, another young player as well. So I hope it goes through, but I reckon it'll happen, man. I reckon it'll happen. So we'll keep our eyes out for that one, Mateus Moresh. And one final question as well, and I wanted to finish on this one because this is sort of a great question that I wanted to just touch on briefly as well. But Harry, once again, thanks for sending in the questions. Harry asks, what inspired you to start the Coast Watch Football podcast? Well, this is a great question because, and if you have been a long-time listener, I've touched on it here and there in terms of sort of what I guess the idea is behind this, right? And I do appreciate you guys, coming along for the journey and building this community with me as well. But the ultimate goal for me is that I want to create an excited and passionate fan base, not just for the Mariners, but for the A-League. Obviously, the Mariners is a great sort of, platform for me to do that, them being the team that I've supported since I was 10 years old. But for the A-League in general, I think especially with the size of that the A-League's at, the clubs have to band together. They have to not share fan bases, but if you're a supporter of an A-League club, you're a supporter of the A-League as a whole. You know what I mean, right? And that's the only way that we're going to grow. And for me, I want to sort of change the conversation a little bit. Not change the conversation. I mean, there's so many people doing so many great things in Australian football, and I'm just, another person sort of, providing my 2 cents. But I just want to help push Australian football that little bit step forward. And I'm trying my best now to make content that's different and that's exciting. And that's why I've, been doing stuff like the FIFA videos. And you're going to see a whole lot more videos coming on the YouTube channel, Coast Watch Football on YouTube, that are going to be really fun and really interactive. And again, looking to get you guys involved as well in some of those videos coming up in the future. So stay tuned for that as well. But yeah, I think that's what inspired me to start up this, to build that excitement, to build that passion. And again, guys, I thank you so much. Like, I do appreciate it so much because this really wouldn't be anything if no one was listening. So it's so great to see that the listenership is building. I think on YouTube, we've been hitting like consistently now. We're starting to hit 100 views per episode, which is amazing, which is like way more than I would ever expect. So thank you so much, guys. And thanks so much for sending in those questions. I wish I could get to them all. If I didn't answer your question, apologies. I try to get around to all of them. Keep sending through the questions. We're going to try and do this every single week, and we won't just be the entire episode. We'll do a little segment maybe towards the start or maybe towards the end where we'll do fan questions, where I'll pick out a few really good questions to discuss. But guys, thanks for sending in those questions. And man, the A-League season is not too far away. Keep an eye out. I reckon we're going to be hearing news real soon, now that restrictions are starting to ease in New South Wales, about the FFA Cup. So keep an eye out for that on the Coast Watch Football socials. Again, links down in the description to this podcast. Check out the Coast Watch Football social media channels and join us on YouTube, where we've got plenty of fun and exciting videos dropping multiple times a week. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning into this podcast episode, Coast Watch Football. Have a great week, and I'll chat to you next Tuesday.